Okay. Welcome, friends. We find ourselves on Yud Zayin Amud Aleph on 17a. Okay, so let's actually review the Mishnah, because naturally the Gemara is going to be elaborating on the Mishnah. So it's of utmost importance that we know what it says in the Mishnah before we go into the Gemara. We actually covered some of the Gemara last week, so we're going to pick up in the Gemara at the words Amar Rabba, which is a little bit shy of halfway down. But first, let's just reread the Mishnah so we know what we're dealing with, okay? So only on the top.
What page, Rabbi?
17a, Yud Zayin Amud Aleph.
17, okay.
All the way on the top. Here chikes a sich met the fana shlosha tfachim psula. So no distance to schach 3 tfachim. So you have an air gap of 3 tfachim between the wall and the schach. Puzzle. By shenivcha sich al gabav. Let's say you have your ceiling in the middle implodes, and you put schach where that hole is. So im yish min hakosel sichach arba amos psula. If there's the ceiling extends 4 amos or more, also puzzle. The Gemara will tell us that less than 4 amos is okay because it's dofen akuma, that we envision as if the wall is bending over and it ends where the schach begins. More than that, more than 4 amos, we have to say, come on, man, that's called ceiling. That's not called wall. Also, if you, similar principle, if you have awnings and then you put schach to cover the rest of it, or if you actually have all kosher schach, but you put non-kosher schach, let's say you have tarp over it that extends to 4 amos or more, then it is pasul. So what you want to note here is that there's 2 measurements mentioned here. There's 3 tfachim for an air gap, and there's 4 amos for non-kosher schach. Right? There's 2 ways we can have an issue. Either there's an absence of covering, which is worse, or there could be a covering, but it's an illegitimate covering. It's not qualified to constitute schach. What's interesting, though, and the Gemara is going to discuss this, is that the Mishnah doesn't talk about 4 tfachim. Usually the halacha is that you have 4 tfachim, handbreadths of non-kosher schach, the sukkah is pasul. It only talks about a scenario in which the schach is all the way on the side of the sukkah by the wall that you get dalet amos. So why didn't the Mishnah tell us the final thing we need to know, which is that if you have non-kosher schach in the middle of your sukkah, you have up until 4 tfachim for it to be kosher. Okay? That last detail, should I reiterate, or did that make sense? Right? 3 tefach gap of air, pasul sukkah. 4 tefach of non-kosher schach, also pasul. But if it's on the side, you get to 4 amos. Okay? So let's go into the Gemara at the words Amar Rabba. I would imagine it's the 2nd page in arts. Well, maybe even the 3rd, because maybe usually the Mishnah is, they have like a lot of footnotes and stuff, right? Someone want to tell us where Amar Rabba, Ashkasinu l'Rabbanan Dvei Rav? Anyone want to pick up on that for us? I mean, those folks using the art scroll, first one to find it, maybe yell it out so that way everyone has the place. All right? Amar Rabba, that's what we're looking for, the first Amar Rabba.
It's on 17A2.
17A2. Excellent. Thank you, Toby.
On the right side.
On the right side. Here we go. Amar Rabba. Ashkasinhu l'Rabban the Yasi Kamri. So I found the Rabbanan who are part of Rav's base medrash. They were sitting and they taught the following halacha. Avir posel bishlosha. Skar posel barba. Just what we said. 3 tfachim of air. Pasels a sukkah, 4 tfachim of non-kosher schach pasels a sukkah. Now, where do we get 3 tfachim, 4 tfachim from? If you remember, we actually had this discussion a while back. 3 tfachim is lavud, so that makes 3 tfachim a significant number. 3 tfachim is what connects something together. More than 3 tfachim is disconnected. And then where do we get 4 tfachim from? So 4 tfachim is the shear for a makom chashiv. For halacha in different areas, 4 tfachim establishes its own place. So when you have 4 tfachim of pasul schach, that's an issue. So the question that Rabbah asks them I asked them as follows. Avir the post b'shlosha minalachu. Well, I don't know if maybe it's not 4 tefachim. If you look in the Mishnah, it says you have up until 4 amos, which is much bigger. So avir the post b'shlosha minalachu. Right? So, my friends, where did we get the idea that avir, that air, passes at a minimum of 3 tefachim? Well, we learned it from our Mishnah on the top of the Yamud. Ditnan. Hirchik es asichach min ha-defanos, shlosha tefachim, psula. If you distance, right? Just a quote from our Mishnah. If you distance schach 3 tefachim from the wall, pasul. Schach pasul, nami lo lifso ela barba amos. So if your source that you're learning these halachos from is from our Mishnah, nowhere in our Mishnah does it talk about non-kosher schach being an issue at 4 tefachim. It's an issue at 4 amos. That's all the Mishnah tells me. It's not. If you have a house that implodes and you put schach on top of it, if there's 4 amos, then we have a problem. Okay. Okay, fine. So that was his claim. That's what Rabbah says to them. Where do you get 4 tefachim for? All I see is 3 tefachim for air, 4 amos for non-kosher schach. Where do you get this 4 tefachim for non-kosher schach from? That's not in the Mishnah. So Amrli, they respond, Barmine, Dahi the Rabbi Shmuel Amri Shavah Mishum Dofen Akuma Naguba. Yes, but why does our Mishnah say 4 amos? Now, this might not sound like a chiddush to you because we've learned Dofen Akuma in the past, and I just gave a background right now, but the Gemara is exploring this now in this discussion. Why did our Mishnah give so much leeway up to 4 amos for non-kosher material schach? Because in our Mishnah, that schach was at the side of the sukkah, and therefore we were able to employ Dofen Akuma. So Dofen Akuma gives us up to 4 amos. But had it not been for Dofen Akuma, had it been in the middle of the sukkah, you would only have 4 tefachim. Good? That's their response. Okay, so they responded to Rabbah. But Rabbah is not relenting. He's going to ask them another question now. I think there's different ways to read, whether it's a continuation or whether it's a separate question. We'll read it as a separate question. But Amin al-Huana, he said, okay, well, let me challenge you. Again, there's a continuation in the sense that they are maintaining the base medrash of whose base medrash? Raz base medrash? Raz base medrash is maintaining that 4 tefachim of schach is puzzle. But how does that make sense? Forget about the Mishnah. Logically, how does that make sense? He's going to challenge him on logical grounds. Ma ilu ika schach puzzle pachus me'arba. So let's say the case is that it sounds like almost like a Hilchos Brachos question. Like, if it's almost analogous, if I eat candy and I drink water and they're both shahakol, can I make a borei nefashos? If I have enough of them that they combine together for a shear. And the issue is that they have different shirim. For liquids, it's revius. For food, it's a kizayis. So you can't combine them together for a borei nefashos. So it's going to be a similar kind of question over here. If I have less than 3 tefachim of airspace, I have less than 4 tefachim of non-kosher schach, on their own, they don't meet the threshold to passel a sukkah. But could we say that they would combine anyway together to at least reach 4 tefachim? So that way, for both of them, 4 tefachim would be passel. So my kishera, would you say that on technical grounds the sukkah is kosher because you don't have 3 tefachim of air, you don't have 4 tefachim of non-kosher schach, but my b'shipudim. But we should imagine you could fill up that space of air with non-kosher schach. They should be able to combine. But my so what? Are you going to claim that the sukkah is puzzle? But it's just what we said. They're not analogous. Air and non-kosher schach, how do they combine with each other? So they responded to Rav, nami. But why should this question be limited to us? You have the same problem. Imagine we're about to say that there's less than 3 tefachim of air and less than 4 amos of non-kosher schach. You run into the same issue. So neither of them reach the shear. So my kshera, my b'shibudin. Again, you could imagine that the airspace is filled with non-kosher schach, and it reaches the shear. My psula, but would you say it's possible? But again, non-kosher schach and air are both problematic, but they're different class. They're different categories. You can't combine them to reach the threshold that's needed, for lack of a better term, to passel a sukkah. So why is Rabba's position that 4 amos is the shear for non-kosher schach to passel sukkah in any part of the sukkah? Why is that any more defensible than the other one? So this is what he answers. Vaminalahu, Rabba responds, Avamilana, hi my bishlam. My position makes sense. Why? Damina arba amos. This is a key term here. When I asserted that you need arba amos, you need 4 amos in order for the non-kosher schach to pass the entire sukkah. That's because it's a formal shear, meaning it's not just the absence of kosher schach, it's that 4 amos is a strike. It negatively impacts the sukkah. That's the threshold for it to actively passel the sukkah. So let me just read that. Let me read that all together one line. Right? So l'hidamina arba amos mishum shiura. The lav shiura. And here is a great shear. So halav shiura. Who came to so for you, okay, so this is what he's saying. So he's saying is that when it comes to 4 tfachim, though, 4 tfachim will not passel the sukkah mishum shear. If you look at Rashi said the arba amos have a shear lifts. It's an actual. It's not just the absence of kosher schach, but it's an actual shear that passels the sukkah. So right, so who came to lo mitzvah? So because 4 amos and 3 tfachim are 2 fundamentally different things. 3 tfachim of air is the absence of schach, but 4 amos of non-kosher schach is an actual measurement that actively disqualifies the sukkah. But he makes an assumption that those who hold that 4 tfachim of non-kosher schach disqualifies the sukkah. There's really no fundamental difference between an air gap or between non-kosher schach, according to the base medrash of Rav. Because for them, it's just a matter of there being too much space that's not occupied by kosher schach. For amos, he's saying, is an actual shear that disqualifies the sukkah. Air, that's 3 tfachim, and 4 tfachim of schach, according to the base medrash of Rav, based on Rabbah's retort, is just a lack of kosher schach. But it's not a formal shear to disqualify the sukkah. Therefore, that means that both air gap and non-kosher schach are fundamentally the same issue. They're the issue of the absence of kosher schach, and therefore they should be able to combine, even if there's less than 3 tfachim of air and less than 4 tfachim of non-kosher schach. But if they're right next to each other, they should combine together to create enough of a haflaga, enough of a usually we use that like vested haflaga when we're talking about in Hilchos Nida. There's enough of an interval, there's enough space that will interrupt and disqualify the sukkah. Nonetheless, Amar le Abai tries to defend the base medrash. He says, "Lamar Navi." But Abai says, but wouldn't you agree that when it comes to a smaller sukkah, even 4 tfachim passel schach would invalidate it? So how could Rabbah come along and teach us that you have up till 4 amos of non-kosher schach? If you have even 4 tfachim of non-kosher schach in a 7x7 sukkah, it's going to be passel. Well, what's the response? Can you guys figure out what the Gemara is going to answer to that? Why would, if you have 4 tfachim, right? What's the minimum shear of a sukkah? 7x7 tfachim. Why would 4 tfachim of passel schach make the entire 7x7 sukkah not kosher? Well, then you only have 3 tfachim of kosher schach. How's that going to create a kosher sukkah? You don't have the sheer sukkah. The Gemara explains. Amalei. It's because you're just lacking a sukkah altogether. You need a sheer sukkah. If you have a 7x7 sukkah and 4 of them, or even just like combining with, or even less than 4, but it combines with air, so you have a little bit of air, you have a little bit of non-kosher skach, you wind up not even having enough kosher skach to constitute a kosher sukkah. So that's the issue over there. All right, but basically just to summarize, we don't paskin like Rabbah, we paskin like the base medrash of Rav, that 4 tfachim of non-kosher skach somewhere in the sukkah, other than right next to the wall, even 4 tfachim will passel the sukkah. But there's an open question here about whether air and non-kosher skach combine together to make that shear to disqualify the sukkah. So is the 4 tevach measurement a formal measurement to disqualify the sukkah, or is it just a lack of continuity in the sukkah? So that's the main debate here in the Gemara. Let me pause. Any questions? Okay. Anything I clarify? All right. Well, that already brings us a quarter way down to the Zayma base. So I think we'll say that's all, folks. As to quote a TV show that I just scarcely was able to watch in my childhood before it lost popularity. All right. So you know what I'm referring to. Okay, very good. So,
sounds like Bugs Bunny to me.
Very good, Phyllis. All right. Most of my references are usually full flat, so thank God. Okay. See, I'm holding. All right. Very good. Thank you again for your patience. Apologies for running late on that. And good learning together.
And good Shabbos.
Good Shabbos.
Good Shabbos, everybody.
Shal Shir B'Tzeres.
Thank you.